I always knew wealth brings out hidden faces, but I never imagined my own nephew would try to betray me at a family dinner. The old chandelier glimmered above the dining room like scattered stars, reflecting off polished crystal and golden cutlery. My estate had been silent all day, anticipating the arrival of family and friends. 35 years of building a fortune had led to this evening, a reunion meant to celebrate legacy, not to reveal the venom that sometimes lurks behind familiar faces. I had spent the morning in careful preparation. The chef's hors d'oeuvres lined the marble counter, delicate smoked salmon roses and truffle-infused canapes arranged with surgical precision. Crystal glasses were polished to perfection, waiting for vintage wines and champagne, the rarest bottles from my personal collection. The private dining room was decorated with white lilies, orchids, and candles flickering softly, the air perfumed with subtle lavender. Every detail was meant to impress, yes, but more importantly, to observe. By 6 p.m., the first guests arrived. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and old family friends smiled warmly, their admiration genuine, or at least well-practiced. Laughter echoed as they toured the home, commenting on the polished floors, the modern art I had collected over decades, the perfectly aligned wine shelves. I watched them closely, noting who lingered near my study and who approached my personal library with curiosity. Then he arrived, Michael, my nephew, the one who always hung in the background with a polite smile that never quite reached his eyes. His fiancée, Carla, followed behind him, her charm layered with a quiet cunning I had learned to detect in years of reading people. Their synchronized movements and subtle glances immediately triggered my instincts. Michael was ambitious, yes, but tonight ambition looked dangerous. Dinner commenced, and the room buzzed with conversation. Toasts were exchanged, champagne poured, and the aroma of roasted lamb and fresh herbs filled the room. I noticed Michael linger near my study entrance, his eyes scanning expensive art and heirlooms. He casually remarked on estate planning, phrasing compliments with the perfect combination of curiosity and flattery. Too perfect. My senses pricked. Later, in the kitchen, I spotted Michael whispering to Carla, heads close together, lips barely moving, gestures small and deliberate. I excused myself and returned to the dining room, feigning interest in the dessert presentation while my eyes never left them. Their quiet plotting could have gone unnoticed by anyone else, but not by me. When dessert arrived, I revealed my rare bottle of 1989 Dom Renan champagne. I poured the first glass for myself, placing it carefully in front of me. Carla moved subtly closer under the pretense of arranging plates, her hand brushing my glass in what seemed accidental, but was too controlled to be innocent. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the realization that I had to act before anyone else suspected a threat. I smiled inwardly, recalling 35 years in business. The lesson was clear. Greed is predictable, but cleverness can always outmaneuver it. Tonight, my family would see loyalty tested, and Michael would learn just how carefully I had watched him for decades. The party proceeded naturally, the laughter and clinking glasses masking my scrutiny. I observed every movement, every glance, every hesitation. Every detail mattered, and when the moment came, I would act. This is the perfect celebration, or the perfect trap, I thought, raising my glass to begin the next toast, carefully keeping my drink untouched by anyone else.
The laughter and chatter of my guests filled the room, But my mind remained sharp, scanning every interaction. Michael had taken a seat beside my youngest cousin, pretending casual interest in her stories about charity work. Carla, ever the attentive partner, hovered near the dessert table, her fingers brushing the polished surface as if rearranging napkins, but I recognized the calculated grace. I excused myself under the pretense of checking on the wine and stepped into my study. The leather-bound contracts, my personal journals, and a few rare collector's items were arranged precisely as I liked. I wasn't paranoid. I was cautious. In my experience, wealth attracts more than admiration. It attracts opportunity for betrayal. And tonight, I had reason to suspect both in my own blood. Returning to the dining room, I poured myself a glass of the rare Dom Renan. The vintage aroma was intoxicating, grounding me in decades of experience. Michael glanced at my glass, a flicker of desire crossing his face, but he quickly masked it with polite conversation. Every detail, every subtle expression revealed intent if one paid attention, and I did. Carla moved closer again, this time to inspect the champagne flutes, her fingers lingering over the glass I had just poured. Her smile was practiced, warm, innocent, reassuring, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of calculation. The memory of her whisper to Michael earlier sent a shiver through me. They had planned something, and their plan revolved around exploiting trust. I smiled politely and said, "Carla, could you fetch a fresh bottle of 1990 Chanterelle? I want the guests to taste both vintages." She hesitated, as if caught off guard, then nodded, masking her momentary disappointment with her usual grace. Perfect. Let her think she had the advantage for a moment longer. Meanwhile, Michael laughed at an anecdote my cousin shared, leaning forward to lower his voice as if confiding a secret. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture measured. The more they tried to hide it, the more obvious it became. I reminded myself to remain calm. Panic betrays weakness. Composure disarms. Dinner concluded, and guests began moving to the terrace for coffee and conversation. I followed at a distance, observing. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden. Lights twinkled overhead, reflecting off crystal glasses as laughter spilled into the evening. Michael reached for a glass of my rare champagne, pretending ignorance of whose drink it was. Carla subtly nudged his hand, the signal unmistakable to someone who had watched the dance of subtle manipulation before. I stepped forward, gently intercepting his reach. "Michael, would you like me to pour a fresh glass? The 1989 vintage deserves the proper presentation." His smile faltered, just slightly, the first real crack in their facade. Carla's eyes narrowed, searching for a reaction, but I remained calm, unflinching. "Of course, Uncle," Michael said, forcing a laugh. He tried to mask the tension in his voice, but the careful observer could see it. They had assumed I would drink without caution, that my trust could be exploited. How wrong they were. I poured the champagne carefully, handing the glass to my cousin instead, ensuring that the couple's attempt to manipulate events had no effect. Carla's subtle frustration was visible, her first misstep. Michael's composure tensed, the first true evidence that their scheme wasn't being unnoticed. Guests continued conversations, oblivious to the undercurrents of betrayal swirling beneath the surface. I watched Michael and Carla, patient, waiting for the moment when they might try something bolder. And when that moment came, they would realize, too late, that I had been prepared all along. Tonight's celebration was supposed to honor decades of achievement and hard work. Instead, it had become a chessboard. Every gesture, every glance, every movement a potential move in a high-stakes game. And in chess, the player who anticipates their opponent's every move holds all the power. I stepped back into the soft glow of the terrace lights, holding my glass lightly. I smiled at my guests, laughter and cheers surrounding me, while inside my mind traced every possibility, every risk. They had plotted against me, but I had already seen the first outlines of their plan. The game had only just begun, but I was not about to lose.
The terrace lights cast a warm glow over the gathering, but my attention was fixed on Michael and Carla. Every gesture, every word from them carried hidden intent. I had seen enough of human nature to know that charm often masks ambition, and ambition unchecked often turns toxic. Tonight, it would reveal itself. Michael excused himself from a conversation about investment strategies and wandered toward the bar, pretending to inspect the selection. Carla lingered nearby, lightly brushing the edges of the counter, positioning herself perfectly to watch my movements without seeming suspicious. I caught the glint of a small packet in her hand. Her preparation was meticulous. The subtle thrill of danger reminded me of battles I'd fought in business, strategy over brute force, foresight over panic. I moved toward the dessert table, casually adjusting some plates, letting my presence appear idle while observing. Michael raised his glass as if in mid-toast, but I noted the exact angle of his wrist, the way his eyes flicked toward me, calculating. Carla's hand hovered near the crystal champagne flutes, her fingers brushing lightly as she prepared to place the contents of her hidden packet into a drink. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was no longer a simple gathering. It had transformed into a battlefield. One wrong move, one misstep, and the consequences could be devastating. But I had the advantage. I had seen the setup, I had anticipated the execution, and I was ready. I walked toward the bar, pretending to examine the wine labels. Michael's hand moved subtly toward a flute I had just set down. Carla mirrored his motion, as if rehearsed. Timing would be everything. I waited until their movements were synchronized, then shifted slightly, creating just enough distraction for them to misplace their intended target. The packet slipped from Carla's fingers, unnoticed by anyone else, landing softly on the edge of the bar. A small sound, a subtle miscalculation, enough to keep me safe. Carla's eyes flicked to the spot where her plan had faltered. Her smile remained in place, but her composure wavered. Michael tried to recover, pretending to pour a glass for himself, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. Their plan, brilliant in conception, had failed in execution. I approached the table where my closest friends were still conversing. Jim and Sarah laughed quietly over a shared memory, completely unaware of the storm brewing just a few steps away. Homer, my oldest mentor, was telling a story about a difficult investment years ago, his voice full of amusement. I sipped my untouched vintage champagne, appearing calm and relaxed, all the while tracking every micro-expression of the would-be betrayers. "Michael, Carla, would you like some help with the champagne?" I asked, casually, smiling in a way that suggested hospitality, not suspicion. Their synchronized movements faltered slightly, a subtle crack in their facade. Carla's hand twitched toward the packet, now lying innocently on the counter. I noted the detail, mentally filing it away for later. Guests continued to mingle, oblivious to the high-stakes tension at the bar. Laughter and music masked the subtle undercurrent of danger, creating a deceptive calm. I let it continue, allowing the couple to believe they had the upper hand, giving them room to make mistakes that would reveal their true intent. I moved back toward the center of the terrace, engaging guests in light conversation. Each step, each laugh, each gesture reinforced my image of composed host, concealing my watchful vigilance. Michael glanced at me, his eyes narrowing for just a fraction of a second, calculating. Carla's expression mirrored his, attempting to regain control of the narrative. They didn't yet realize that their every move was observed, every plan noted. The night had shifted from celebration to strategy, from congratulation to confrontation waiting in the wings. I had survived attempts before, in business and in life, by staying 3 steps ahead. Tonight would be no different. Their ambition and greed had been revealed, and now it was only a matter of time before justice, or at least exposure, followed. I raised my glass to toast with Jim and Sarah, letting the reflection of the candlelight glimmer off the crystal. In the shadows, Carla and Michael plotted their next move, unaware that the board had already turned against them. And as I sipped my untouched vintage champagne, I silently vowed no betrayal would succeed tonight. The music drifted softly through the terrace, but my mind was alert to every movement, every whisper, every subtle shift in expression. Michael and Carla had regrouped, their charm now tinged with frustration. They were confident that their scheme had gone unnoticed, but confidence is dangerous when it blinds you to reality. Carla moved toward the dessert table again, this time adjusting the placement of the chocolate truffles, her hand brushing lightly across the plate. Michael hovered near the bar, pretending to study the labels, his eyes flicking to mine with an intensity that betrayed his concealed intent. The packet she had dropped earlier was now back in her hand, carefully concealed beneath her clutch. I noted the timing, the angles, the readiness in their posture. This was no casual social maneuver. It was calculated and deliberate. I walked past them with casual nonchalance, asking a few guests about their favorite dishes, laughing gently at stories, allowing my presence to mask my scrutiny. Michael and Carla mirrored each other's motions, maintaining appearances of cordiality, but the tension between them was palpable. I had survived the boardroom, survived business deals where stakes were measured in millions. But tonight's battlefield was different. The players were personal, and the stakes were life itself. I lingered near Homer and Sarah, engaging them in light conversation, ensuring that they remained near the center of the terrace, away from the potential danger zone. Every subtle movement, every laugh, every sip of wine became part of a carefully choreographed dance. Michael reached for a glass, Carla subtly guiding his motion toward a vintage champagne I had set aside. I stepped slightly to the side, brushing against a table as if by accident, creating just enough distraction to misalign their plan. Carla's eyes widened for a fleeting moment, though her face remained a mask of composure. Michael's hand froze mid-pour, the small shift throwing off their timing. Guests nearby laughed at an unrelated joke, unaware of the near disaster that had just been averted. I allowed myself a small inward smile. Precision and patience had won the first round. "Lester, would you like some assistance with the champagne toast?" Carla asked, her tone smooth but a fraction too fast. Her eyes betrayed her urgency, scanning for my reaction. I nodded casually, masking the understanding I had gained. "Yes, that would be wonderful," I said warmly, gesturing for her to follow me to the display. Michael trailed closely behind, unaware that every step they took was being observed, every intention silently recorded. I walked toward the table with my closest friends, carefully positioning myself so that any potential threat would have to pass within my line of sight. Jim and Sarah continued their conversation, oblivious to the high-stakes maneuvering occurring just feet away. Homer leaned closer, sharing a fond story about retirement planning, and I used the opportunity to position the threatened glasses safely out of reach. Carla and Michael exchanged a fleeting glance, an unspoken acknowledgment of their partial failure, but their composure remained intact for now. I allowed them a brief moment of perceived control, knowing that overconfidence was their weakness. Subtle pressure, careful observation, and precise timing would expose them completely. I finally addressed the gathering with a toast, raising my glass high. To friendship, to loyalty, and to the wisdom of patience, I said, letting the words resonate across the terrace. My eyes swept the crowd, settling momentarily on Michael and Carla, who raised their glasses in polite mimicry. The irony of the situation was delicious. They believed they were participants in a celebration, yet they were already in the spotlight of exposure. A guest laughed, breaking the slight tension, and I joined in, maintaining appearances of relaxed hospitality. But beneath the calm exterior, my mind ran rapid scenarios. How to guide the evening toward revelation. How to ensure justice without chaos. How to turn betrayal into visible truth. The pieces were in place. All that remained was the decisive moment when the mask of charm would slip, and truth would shine for everyone to see. And as the night deepened, I knew the first confrontation had already shifted the balance. Carla and Michael's calculated plan had faltered, and from that falter, the path to their exposure and to justice was already forming.
The night air was warm, scented faintly with jasmine and the subtle aroma of fine wines. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and the ambiance of celebration filled every corner of the terrace. Yet I felt the undercurrent of danger like a storm just beyond the horizon. Michael and Carla moved with practiced ease, but the tightness in their eyes betrayed the pressure I had already applied. They believed they were in control, but the tables had begun to turn. Carla approached the dessert table again, this time carrying a small envelope hidden in her clutch. Her movements were casual, designed to escape notice, yet deliberate in intent. Michael pretended to engage in conversation with Jim, but his glances toward me were sharp, calculating. Every instinct in me screamed alert. Every memory of past business rivalries screamed caution. I had survived the boardroom, corporate takeovers, and financial betrayals, but this was personal and deadly. I lingered near the bar, pouring a glass of my favorite 1987 Bordeaux, casually watching their choreography. Carla dropped the envelope into a wine glass she had previously set aside, her hand brushing lightly against the rim. The motion was slight, but precise, almost imperceptible. My pulse quickened as I realized the gravity of the act. This was no casual mischief. This was attempted murder disguised as party etiquette. Michael raised his glass, poised to drink, and Carla's fingers hovered subtly near it, ensuring he would consume the hidden poison. The irony was sharp, and I allowed a small, private smile to cross my face. The game had escalated, but their overconfidence had given me the advantage. I had learned long ago that timing, patience, and observation are more powerful than brute force. I moved closer to the pair under the guise of hosting, asking casually, "Would you like assistance with these glasses?" Both froze, just a fraction, caught off guard by my sudden proximity. "Oh, that's fine," Carla replied, masking urgency with polite charm, but her eyes flickered with calculation. Michael's hand tightened around his glass. It was a perfect moment, a subtle opening that I could exploit without raising suspicion among the other guests. Stepping slightly aside, I brushed past the table, pretending to adjust a centerpiece, and in a single smooth motion switched the glasses. The wine meant for Michael now rested safely at the bar, untouched and unpoisoned. Carla's envelope lay on the ground, unnoticed by the guests, her deadly plan interrupted in a manner invisible to anyone else. I exhaled silently, heart hammering, but my face remained calm, welcoming, unbroken. Dennis, who had been helping with the champagne toast, leaned close and whispered, "Everything okay?" I nodded, a faint smile on my lips, masking the storm of strategy and adrenaline beneath. "Perfectly fine, just enjoying the party." His trust in me remained intact, unaware of the danger that had just brushed against him. I returned to the center of the terrace, raising my glass for the toast. To friendship, to loyalty, and to the wisdom of patience, I announced, letting the words ring across the gathered friends and family. Carla and Michael raised their glasses in response, their charm polished, but their confidence shaken. Every guest felt the warmth of celebration, oblivious to the near catastrophe that had just unfolded in plain sight. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to savor the sweet irony. The poison intended to harm me now sat unused, a silent testament to the vigilance and foresight that had protected everyone. Michael and Carla's expressions flickered with unease, but they concealed it well, too aware that any overt movement could draw attention. I had turned their own plan against them, without a single guest suspecting a thing. As laughter resumed, conversations flowed naturally, and the night seemed uninterrupted. I knew the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The first move was theirs, a bold attempt to seize what they had no right to claim. But now, under the same chandeliers, with the same clinking glasses, the shadow of their betrayal was laid bare in my mind, and the path to exposing them fully was clear. The evening was still young, the danger had not ended, but for the first time I felt control, not just of the party, but of the justice that was about to unfold. And when it did, Michael and Carla would discover that no deception, no matter how carefully plotted, could withstand the vigilance of someone who had spent a lifetime anticipating betrayal.
The clinking of glasses and warm laughter masked the tension in my veins, but I could see it in their eyes. Michael and Carla's carefully constructed facade was cracking. I had given them every reason to believe their plan had succeeded, yet now I held the upper hand. Every movement, every gesture was deliberate as I guided the night toward the moment they would finally be unmasked. I leaned casually against the terrace railing, sipping my unpoisoned wine, scanning the crowd. The other guests were engrossed in their conversations, oblivious to the deadly game unfolding a few steps away. Dennis chatted with Jim and Frank, discussing old business strategies, while his wife— Wait, I had switched focus now. Carla was trying to blend charm with subtle manipulation, smiling at the right moments, offering help with drinks, ensuring all eyes remained on her. I cleared my throat lightly, a signal to the attentive guests that I had something to say. "Friends," I began, raising my glass slightly to gain attention. Conversations hushed subtly, glasses paused mid-lift, eyes turning toward me. "Tonight is a celebration of years of hard work, loyalty, and trust. But it is also a reminder that appearances can be deceiving." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Michael shifted slightly, eyes narrowing, sensing the change in tone. Carla smiled nervously, pretending to sip her drink while glancing toward me, calculating. They still didn't know that their plan had been foiled and that their very actions were being observed and recorded in my memory. "I have always believed that loyalty should be rewarded and deception should be exposed," I continued, my voice steady, controlled. "Some people here tonight thought they could take advantage of this celebration for their own gain, using charm and manipulation to mask their true intentions." Gasps rippled through the gathering as I slowly turned toward Carla's poisoned glass that had once rested. Dennis stepped forward instinctively, concern etched across his face. "Dad, what do you mean?" he asked, but his voice carried uncertainty. He was still unaware of the gravity of what had nearly happened. I raised my hand slightly, gesturing toward Carla. "This glass," I said,
motioning to the untouched wine she had intended to use tonight, was meant to serve its purpose tonight, but thanks to vigilance and quick thinking, disaster was averted. The silence that fell over the terrace was absolute, every guest's attention now fixed on the unfolding drama. Carla's carefully maintained composure crumbled, her lips pressed into a thin line, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Michael's face paled as he realized their scheme had been discovered. "What are you saying?" Michael's voice was low, tense, but it trembled with panic. "I'm saying," I continued, voice firm, "that deceit has consequences, and the truth, no matter how well hidden, always comes to light." I stepped closer to the pair, deliberately drawing the crowd's attention to them. "This glass," I said, motioning to the untouched wine she had intended to use tonight, "was meant to serve its purpose tonight, but thanks to vigilance and quick thinking, disaster was averted." The silence that fell over the terrace was absolute, every guest's attention now fixed on the unfolding drama. Carla's carefully maintained composure crumbled, her lips pressed into a thin line, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Michael's face paled as he realized their scheme had been discovered. "What are you saying?" Michael's voice was low, tense, but it trembled with panic. "I'm saying," I continued, voice firm, "that deceit has consequences, and the truth, no matter how well hidden, always comes to light." I stepped closer to the pair, deliberately drawing the crowd's attention to them. "This glass," I said, motioning to the untouched wine she had intended to use tonight, "was meant to serve its purpose tonight, but thanks to vigilance and quick thinking, disaster was averted." The silence was absolute, while Carla, Dennis, and Michael stood as the bedrock of this complex security system. Carla was the broker that is preceded not as an industry, but as a face of this lavish and dangerous game. Her polls were protected by the silence of Dennis, and trust was a very important part of this relationship. That variety of fear made her company completely fragile. It folded her and laid her naked in front of everyone. Her failure was complete, and Michael tried to save face, but his attempts were weak and futile. The completeness of failure has occurred. The crowd's reaction shifted from confusion to a mixture of shock, admiration, and respect. People whispered among themselves, praising my composure, the strategic intelligence that had prevented catastrophe, and the courage to expose betrayal without endangering anyone else. Dennis stood frozen, finally understanding the full scale of Carla and Michael's intentions. I had no idea," he murmured, eyes wide with shame and disbelief. His loyalty, his genuine remorse for earlier tensions had now found clarity. I allowed the moment to linger, letting the lesson settle. Betrayal, I knew, would always carry consequences, but tonight justice had been served quietly, efficiently, and without needless chaos. Carla and Michael's ambitions had been crushed not with violence, but with observation, patience, and calculated foresight. And as the crowd slowly returned to their conversations, the celebration resumed, but with a subtle undertone of respect for what had just transpired. Trust had been reaffirmed, and loyalty rewarded. And the message was unmistakable. True success isn't just wealth. It's the wisdom to navigate treachery without becoming its victim.
The night air felt heavier after the exposure, though the music and laughter resumed in cautious whispers. Guests were still processing the shock, their glances flitting between Carla and Michael and the rest of us. The terrace, once a scene of joyous celebration, now held a subtle tension, the memory of nearly disastrous betrayal lingering like a shadow. I stepped back, letting Dennis approach me. His expression was a mixture of guilt, relief, and disbelief. "Dad, I can't believe she actually tried to—" His voice faltered. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did exactly what a son should. You trusted your instincts, and your father survived because he remained vigilant." Dennis nodded, his posture stiff but grateful, realizing the gravity of the lesson he had been spared firsthand. Carla and Michael hovered near the exit, their plans unraveling faster than either could manage. Carla's mascara-streaked cheeks glistened in the soft light, a visual testimony to her failed deceit. Michael looked pale, jaw set, knowing the credibility of both his influence and his intentions had evaporated in front of every guest. I allowed my gaze to sweep the terrace, ensuring everyone understood the severity of the situation without raising my voice unnecessarily. "Tonight is a reminder," I began again, directing my attention to all guests, "that wealth and success come with responsibility, but more importantly, they come with the need for vigilance. Not every smile, every gesture of support is genuine." The murmurs of agreement were audible, nods of acknowledgement rippling through the crowd. Dennis, regaining some composure, stepped closer to me. I should have realized earlier. I let my own desire for reconciliation blind me to warning signs." I shook my head gently. "You acted with a good heart, son. That's all anyone can ask. But tonight we've learned that intentions matter, and the company of those we trust is priceless." Carla, sensing that her final opportunity to manipulate was slipping, tried one last desperate act of self-preservation. "Dennis, Dad, please, you don't understand," she stammered, but the room had shifted. Her words carried no weight now. Guests' expressions, once polite, now radiated suspicion, disbelief, and disapproval. Michael's attempts at explanation were equally impotent. The realization had set in, their social power, their charm, their feigned loyalty, all meaningless under scrutiny and genuine observation. I guided Dennis and our closest friends to regroup near the center of the terrace, creating a subtle buffer around the perpetrators. "Sometimes," I said softly, "justice is not about punishment alone. It is about exposing the truth, about showing those who manipulate that their actions have consequences, even without immediate legal recourse." Homer and Mai, still shaken from witnessing the near tragedy, joined us, their faces etched with relief and gratitude. "You saved us," Homer whispered, voice trembling. I never imagined such deceit could come from our own family." I placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Not your fault. You raised her as best you could. Choices she made were hers alone." Guests, now quietly resuming conversations, began to discuss the events with hushed admiration. The narrative was clear. A calculated betrayal had been thwarted without harm, a cunning exposure of malice that preserved life and dignity. Stories of loyalty, integrity, and wisdom flowed alongside toasts of genuine celebration. Dennis finally confronted his wife. I can't believe you," he said, voice low, but filled with the weight of realization. Carla's attempt to manipulate had failed completely. The man who had once been under her influence now recognized her duplicity. The emotional shock, the betrayal, the painful truth, it all crashed down in a silence heavy with judgment. Michael tried to intercede, but Dennis's resolve was firm. "No explanations, no negotiations. Tonight the truth stands, and I'll decide how we move forward." His voice carried both authority and sorrow, marking the shift from naive forgiveness to clear-eyed understanding. As the evening drew to a close, the terrace transformed back into a space of genuine warmth. Candles flickered, soft laughter returned, and conversations resumed with a renewed depth, a blend of celebration and reflection. True friends, loyal allies, and family members who had proven their sincerity surrounded me, their presence a testament to the resilience of trust, the triumph of wisdom, and the enduring strength of integrity. By the time the last guests departed, Dennis had begun to grasp the magnitude of what had transpired. Carla and Michael's ambitions had been thoroughly dismantled, their deceit exposed, their manipulation powerless against careful observation and strategic patience. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the terrace, casting long shadows over the remnants of the previous night's chaos. The memory of shattered crystal and poisoned wine lingered, a stark reminder that deceit had almost claimed an innocent life. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp morning air settle my thoughts. Today was about clarity, confrontation, and finally separating truth from illusion. Dennis arrived first, hesitant, carrying a bag of personal items Carla had left behind. His expression was conflicted, guilt and disbelief competing with the dawning recognition of reality. "Dad, I didn't see it coming. I wanted to trust her," he admitted quietly. I nodded. "You acted with the heart of a son, Dennis. That's what matters. But sometimes the people closest to us hide the sharpest teeth behind the warmest smiles." We moved to the study, away from the lingering whispers of the morning cleanup crew. The leather portfolio with the $32 million sale contracts sat undisturbed on the desk. They represented more than money. They were the tangible proof of a lifetime of effort, risk, and sacrifice. Dennis looked at them, a mix of admiration and regret in his eyes. "I've been thinking, maybe I let ambition blind me. I almost became a part of her plan without realizing it." "Ambition is not the enemy," I said. "It's unchecked trust that can be dangerous. You trusted someone who exploited your compassion and manipulated your guilt. But you didn't make the mistake of drinking that wine. That's a lesson worth remembering." Dennis absorbed my words silently, understanding that tonight's near tragedy had come with an education he could never forget. By mid-morning, Carla and Michael had been summoned back, the weight of exposure pressing down on them. Dennis was firm. He refused to allow either to manipulate him further. Carla tried the same sweet, apologetic tone she had perfected last night, but the charm was broken. "Dennis, please, you don't understand. I didn't mean—" "Save it," Dennis interrupted sharply. His voice carried the authority of someone no longer under illusion or fear. "I've seen the truth. I've seen what you're capable of." His gaze shifted to me, "And I understand now why you never trusted her completely." Carla's face betrayed panic. Her manipulations, her careful planning, even the almost successful murder attempt, none of it had prepared her for this reckoning. Michael's voice cracked as he tried to intercede, but Dennis was relentless. "The evidence is gone, yes, but the intent is clear. Your actions speak louder than words." I added calmly, "Sometimes the best justice is not in the courts. It's in revelation, exposure, and the world seeing your true nature. Tonight, everyone who matters will understand who you really are." Carla's shoulders slumped. Her carefully constructed facade was collapsing. She realized that wealth and charm were meaningless when confronted by vigilance, intelligence, and integrity. Dennis stepped back, breathing heavily, the weight of disillusionment pressing down on him. "I don't know what to do now. I loved her, Dad, but—" He looked at me. "I can't ignore this." "That's right," I said softly. "You honor what's real. And right now, what's real is the loyalty, honesty, and love that has surrounded you your entire life." I gestured to the contracts, the study, the quiet stability of our surroundings. "This is the life you build when you act with integrity, not manipulation, not lies, not betrayal." Carla and Michael were escorted off the property. their exit silent but loaded with consequence. Dennis watched the tail lights fade, a mixture of sorrow and relief in his expression. "I can't believe it came to this," he murmured. "Believe it, and remember it. Family, friends, trust, and integrity. They are the only currency worth holding. Tonight you'll learn that lesson better than any money, any gift, or any charm could ever teach." Later, as Dennis and I reviewed the portfolio and the evening's events, the weight of everything settled into clarity. Loyalty and betrayal, manipulation and exposure, greed and integrity, they had all played their part in this dramatic lesson. The morning sun highlighted the calm after the storm, a reminder that justice, once carefully orchestrated and observed, always finds a way to balance itself. We shared a quiet toast with water in crystal glasses, a symbol of victory without harm. "To lessons learned," I said. Dennis raised his glass, "and to knowing who deserves our trust," he added, echoing the hard-won wisdom of the previous night. The day stretched onward, serene but profound. The echoes of betrayal had faded, replaced with understanding, reflection, and the promise of a future built on honesty. Dennis had emerged wiser, our family bonds stronger, and the malicious forces that had sought to corrupt us dismantled, powerless under the clarity of truth.
Evening had returned to the terrace, but this time it carried serenity instead of tension. The shattered crystal and poisoned wine were now just memories, reminders of a night when deceit had nearly triumphed, and yet had failed. Dennis and I sat side by side, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The air was crisp, carrying faint scents of the flowers from the night before, and the garden lights twinkled like distant stars, a calm contrast to the chaos of betrayal. Dennis spoke first, voice low but firm. "Dad, I can't believe how close I came to being manipulated. I thought I understood loyalty. I didn't. Not until last night." His eyes reflected a mix of regret and enlightenment. I nodded. "Trust is earned, Dennis, not assumed. And sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people we think we know best." The house was quiet now, cleared of guests and debris. The portfolio of contracts, representing the $32 million sale, sat untouched on the study desk. Its weight was more than financial. It symbolized decades of sacrifice, vision, and integrity. For a moment, I allowed myself to reflect on the irony. Carla had attempted to destroy not just me, but the life Dennis and I had built together, all for money she had never earned. "Dad," Dennis said, breaking my thoughts, "I want to make this right. I need to rebuild my own judgment, my own sense of what matters." His words carried sincerity I hadn't seen before. I nodded. "Trust is earned, Dennis, not assumed. And sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people we think we know best." Later, Homer and Myra joined us, still shaken but safe. Their gratitude was palpable. Tears streamed down Myra's cheeks as she spoke. "We are so thankful you saw through her plan before anyone was harmed. Our hearts are heavy, but we feel relief and hope." Homer nodded silently. Clenching my hand, "Your foresight saved me, Lester, and in doing so reminded us that goodness can prevail even in the face of deliberate malice." We walked together through the terrace, surveying the remnants of the party and the flowers still standing resiliently in the evening air. Evil sometimes wears the perfect mask, but the truth always has a way of revealing itself. I looked at her, nodded, and said, "And when it does, you can either crumble under the weight of betrayal or rise with clarity and strength." Tonight, we rise. Dennis took a deep breath, finally allowing a measure of closure. "I think I understand now. Success isn't just financial. It's about integrity, about nurturing relationships that can withstand pressure and deceit. That's the real inheritance." I gestured toward the study, the leather portfolio resting quietly on the desk.
And this, Dennis, is the fruit of that integrity. Every decision, every sacrifice, every lesson learned, all of it earned legitimately. No one could take that from us, and no one could ever manufacture it with lies or manipulation. As the night deepened, we shared a quiet toast, water in crystal glasses, symbolic of wisdom, clarity, and resilience. The lesson was clear. Revenge, if necessary, need not be violent. It can be patience, observation, and exposing the truth so that deceit becomes its own downfall. Carla and Michael had left, their manipulations exposed to Dennis and myself, powerless to recover trust or influence. For the first time since the crisis began, the house felt lighter. Laughter returned softly, not from celebration, but from relief, the kind that comes when a storm passes, leaving clarity in its wake. Dennis and I walked to the garden fountain, reflecting on how nearly everything could have ended differently, and how our vigilance had turned disaster into triumph. Tomorrow, I said, we start a new chapter, free from fear, free from manipulation, surrounded by the people who truly matter. That's the greatest victory of all. Dennis raised his glass, nodding solemnly. To family, to wisdom, and to the life we choose to protect. The final night ended with serenity. Justice had been served without violence, innocence preserved, and betrayal exposed. The contract sat safely in the study, reminders of a life built on effort and honesty. And as the moonlight bathed the terrace, I realized the ultimate truth. The richest wealth is not money, but clarity, loyalty, and the people who stand with you through every storm. The story closed, but the lessons endured. Trust wisely, observe carefully, and always allow integrity to guide your path.